Jack Suwinski has the tools for a breakout: power, speed, and discipline. But what does he need to do to break out in 2024?
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And folks, welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. My name is Ethan Smith. You can follow me right there on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet at FanDuel.com/LockedOn. And it is the second to last 2024 player preview series show of the season. The season's inching closer and closer. Remember, it's a leap year. Today is not the last day of February. We have one more day of February, tomorrow, February 29th, which will see two episodes for you guys. We'll get into that a little bit more later. But it's time to talk about Jack Suwinski, the right field battle, and more. We've talked already about Bryan Reynolds. We talked about him last week. We've talked about what he means to this outfield. But Jack Suwinski, who we start with today, is a guy that's very interesting to look at when you're looking at him in the microcosm of 2024. Because when you look at his first two seasons with Pittsburgh since coming over from the San Diego Padres, he has shown flashes of being a strong, powerful player. I mean, we have seen it from Jack Suwinski over the last two seasons. He's hit 45 home runs the last 2 years, has posted a .436 slugging and a .758 OPS. So yeah, he can hit a baseball, folks. We know that about Jack Suwinski. The only thing, though, about Jack Suwinski is, yes, he's had the very high highs, and he's also had the very low lows. Because in the time that he's shown flashes, he's also shown red flags. You look at those red flags, he has a 30% strikeout rate or higher in his first 2 years, slotting in at 31.6% overall. And his expected batting average also sits at a .212 so far in those two seasons. So there's some really, really good and then some really, really bad. Now, he does do a lot well. We're not going to discount anything and say that Jack Suwinski does not do a lot well, folks. I mean, you look at last year and his 2023 advanced metrics, average exit velocity of 90.5, 72nd percentile, barrel percentage of 15.7%, 94th percentile, chase percentage of 18.2%, 96th percentile, walk rate of 14%, 94th percentile. He does a lot of good things well, and it's clear what he does well. He doesn't chase pitches out of the zone very often. Excuse me. He hits the ball hard. He hits the ball far. He just has to do it more consistently. And when I say more consistently, we know about those long, tumultuous stretches that Jack Suwinski has where he'll go 0 for 19 or 1 for 26. And we've seen them happen before, even to the point where we've seen him get sent back down to AAA because of it. And when you look at last season, for instance, Suwinski only had 2 full months of the year. I'm excluding October because there was only like 3 or 4 games. Those months being April and September, where he hit higher than 246, and he hit 297 and 291 in those months. And to add to that, he had 3 months, May, June, and August, very close to each other, where he hit 207 or lower. And don't get me wrong, I never expect Jack Suwinski to ever be a 4 average type of hitter. But having Mendoza line months more often than 250 average months is something you don't want to see from a guy like Jack Suwinski. Now, you're obviously going to hear a lot of people say he's going to likely be that 3 common outcomes type hitter. He's either going to strike out, he's going to walk, or he's going to hit a bomb. Now, we've seen very good hitters in Major League Baseball that have been 3 common outcome hitters, arguably the best of the bunch being Kyle Schwarber. Kyle Schwarber has had a long and very successful MLB career, being a 3 common outcomes type of hitter. But really, I don't think it's so much about him being a 3 common outcomes type of guy. I think a lot of it still has to do with the fact that you need to eliminate those long stretches of torrid play. And if you do that, that would move mountains for Jack Suwinski. And again, I'm not saying I want Jack Suwinski to be a guy that's hitting 265 or 270. He's just not that type of player. He's not ever going to be that type of player. If he is, he's going to be a potential Hall of Famer. I will let you know that right now. But I want to keep going back to the point with Jack Suwinski that we've seen what he is capable of. And a lot of it just has to do with improvements that are clear-cut. They're in the stats, they're in the box score, they're in the advanced metrics. Another one of those is that you would like to see him improve at least a little bit against lefties. I'm not asking him to have a massive improvement against lefties because it's hard to hit lefty-lefty in this league, especially when you hit for power like Jack Suwinski does. Last year against righties, he was very good. He slashed 232, 353, 503, and 856 with 24 home runs and 60 RBIs, most of what his stats were. Versus lefties, on the other hand, 200, 295, 313, 608 with 2 home runs and 14 RBIs. So again, a clear discrepancy for sure, but one that Suwinski has the tools to fix. And I think that it's interesting that you're hearing me say all these things about what Jack Suwinski needs to improve on. And obviously the strikeouts are an issue and you would like to see him improve against lefties. Folks, he hit 200 against lefties last year, very much better against righties, and he still hit 26 homers last year in 144 games amidst the struggling months and the struggles against lefties. I'm here to tell you, if he even marginally fixes those issues in 2024, folks, he'll hit 30 homers in his sleep, especially if his top advanced metrics stay where they are, like the barrel rate, like the average exit velocity. And I don't think that there should be any expectation that those go anywhere else. Now, Suwinski also goes into this year headlining a Pirates lineup that now you start to look at it, especially with what I've spoken about in this player preview series this year, that has real power. Bryan Reynolds, Rowdy Tellez, O'Neal Cruz. Throw Key Brian Hayes in there if you want to. Leover Peguero could be a part of that conversation. Henry Davis, if he takes the right steps forward at the plate, could be a part of that conversation. But Jack Suwinski could, and very much should, lead the team in homers this year. Now, even if he does hit 30 homers this year, depending on his other metrics, I mean, he could hit 30 homers and hit 215. You may leave that campaign as a fan and say, that wasn't really a breakout campaign. It was just something that we've seen before. But having a 30 home run player on your team, folks, is no joke. And if he only continues to get better in the home run department while also eliminating that strikeout issue, at least marginally, and continuing to get on base via the free pass, Jack Suwinski could be a diamond in the rough for this team. And I mean, again, everything we just spoke about, limiting the strikeouts, continuing to walk, eliminating those long stretches of futility. Those are the keys for Jack Suwinski in 2024. And again, he's shown in his toolbox with how he plays that it allows him to improve and adjust on those things. And if he does, the Pirates may have a strong complementary piece to their core moving forward. And if he takes even a further step forward, you're looking at Jack Suwinski even being a part of the core that eventually competes for this Pittsburgh Pirates roster. He is a good player, folks, and you just have to look past some of the things that he obviously struggles with. But if he can continue to move forward and improve in the areas that he needs to improve on, folks, Jack Suwinski and Bryan Reynolds could be a dynamic duo in the outfield for years to come. And it's going to be very interesting to see what Jack Suwinski has to offer the Pittsburgh Pirates this season. But before we get into arguably one of my favorite spring battles of spring training, much like second base. We're going to talk about right field, which is featured with a couple of good players players, won't go as far as saying good players yet, but some players that have real stake at the position in right field. But before we talk about that, folks, we are going to talk about FanDuel. Folks, FanDuel is here for all of your betting needs this 2024 season because new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet at FanDuel.com right now. And you can get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams like my Los Angeles Clippers with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot today, because FanDuel is an official sportsbook partner of the NBA and an official sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network. And folks, also don't forget that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app, your YouTube feed, and more. And folks, also welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. My name again is Ethan Smith, bringing you all your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. And one of the things that will be going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates this spring training, of course, is the battle in right field. And all throughout the player preview series, we've spoken about battles from starting pitching with Luis Ortiz, Roanzi, and Quinn Priester. We've spoken about second base with Liover Peguero, Nick Gonzalez, Jared Triolo, and Ji-Hwan Bae. And I spoke earlier in this player preview series about second base being likely the strongest position battle we'll see. But I think right field could give it a run for its money. And there's a lot of reason for that, because there's two players there that I think really headline this race, both offering very good things at the position in their own rights. And we're going to get through that here in just a minute. RotoChamp, by the way, projecting right now, RotoChamp projections, great place to look at for projecting an opening day roster. Also, FanGraphs does a great job with that as well. But RotoChamp is giving the edge to Joshua Palacios for now, slotting him in alongside Reynolds and Suwinski in the outfield. Palacios, who some of you may have forgotten, was on this show last year. If you've been on my show, you're a friend of the show. Had a mini breakout from his time elsewhere. He had career highs in pretty much every metric you could think of last year. His 692 OPS leaves a ton to be desired, but we all know what Palacios was great at last year, and that was being clutch in clutch moments. He was as clutch as anybody last year, having a 1.009 OPS, 2 home runs, and 7 RBIs in 27 at-bats in the 9th inning last year. Joshua Palacios was clutch last year, folks. He also hit above 300 in the 6th through 8th inning. So, yeah, he had the clutch gene. But one thing that a lot of people forgot about Joshua Palacios, I think, last year was that he was also very good in scoring runners from scoring position last year, having an 825 OPS, 4 home runs, and 29 RBIs and 65 at-bats with runners in scoring position last year. He also had a strong ending to the season, highlighted by 868 OPS in September. So you would think that for a guy like Joshua Palacios, that should propel him into 2024 with a boost. We've seen a little bit of him in spring training, but obviously still a lot to see before March 29th. But this offseason, lots of people wanted to see an addition to the outfield, and we got one in Edward Olivares. Still haven't really learn the correct pronunciation on Edward Olivares, but that's what I say. And he was acquired from Kansas City this offseason. And folks, this kid can mash. I really think he can. He had a power breakout of sorts last year with the Royals. He hit 12 of his career 24 home runs last year, but he was expected to hit more home runs in 28 of the 30 MLB ballparks last year. Now, you would like to think that PNC Park was one of those places, but in PNC, for instance, he's expected to hit 12. So that's really all that really boils down to. But his expected home run rate was 17.3. And that offers optimism that that number could increase this year. And when you're looking at a guy like Edward Olivares, for instance, 17.3 home runs, along with what I mentioned about Jack Suwinski in the first segment and Rowdy Tellez entering this lineup, O'Neal Cruz returning to this lineup, Bryan Reynolds and Key Brian Hayes, and the potential of Henry Davis and Leover Peguero. Folks, 17 home runs for Edward Olivares, who could probably slot in the 7 hole. That is awesome to have in your lineup. That is absolutely phenomenal to have in your lineup. Now for Olivares, it's all about getting the ball off the bat harder. That's going to be his biggest thing that he has to do. His average exit velocity has never exceeded 90 miles per hour. It sits at 87.2 on his career. That's something you would like to see. Now, arguably the biggest reason for his home run surge last season had to come from the increase in launch angle last year, as his launch angle went from 6.6 to 12.2. Bringing his average to 9.8 on his career. That's how important that launch angle was to what he did last season. Speaking on the fact, too, that he never had a launch angle above 8 before last year. Now, as far as Olivares goes defensively, yeah, you're sacrificing defense for a strong bat. He had a -7 outs above average last year. Palacios had a 0. And although he does have a 90th percentile arm, which could be useful in right field, -7 outs above average is not great. Olivares, by the way, one thing that a lot of people think about him, and it kind of fits the bill and kind of doesn't, he can't spray the ball around the diamond, but he does tend to use the left side most often to do most of his damage. And that spoke because all 12 of his home runs last year were over the left field wall. And I think it's interesting that when you look at a guy like Olivares, I think he becomes a strong, at worst, a strong fourth option with some pop in the outfield. But with the right step forward, I think he could give Palacios a run for the spot. And then I also think that it's fair to include Connor Joe in this conversation. He's the vet of the group, and we've spoken about him in the player preview series already multiple times. We've spoken about him at first base and potentially even second. And of this group of 3, Joe is the best defensive player of the group. He posted a 2 outs above average last year while hitting 11 home runs and had a 760 OPS. So as far as well-rounded goes, it's Connor Joe. Now, his most games came at right field last year as well. He appeared in 57 games and 39 starts there, where he posted a .987 fielding percentage. So again, if you're looking for the best defensive option in right field, it's going to be Connor Joe. But why I don't want to pen Connor Joe as the starter in right field is pretty simple. Because much like Triolo, I think Joe is going to move around the diamond a bit this season. So I think that really removes him from starting often in right field. I'm not saying he can't start out there at all, because it is a position that he played the most last year. But I do think with defensive needs elsewhere, especially at first base, I think that's going to kind of move him away from that position full time. And you're going to see a lot of Connor Joe at first base and the corner outfield. So for now, I think I give Palacios the edge. But keep in mind of the minor league options when this decision is made. I don't know them off the top of my head right now, but just keep them in mind. Spring will also just straight up allow Palacios and Olivares to give the Pirates a good look at both players. So we'll see how the battle progresses as spring moves along. But again, Palacios your clutch guy, a little bit better defender. Olivares has the potential to break out with the home runs. You heard the statistics expected last year. Maybe he gets to that total. We'll have to wait and see. And we're going to have a new segment here in the third segment of today's show throughout spring training. It's going to be spring notes and news. We're going to be looking at everything that happened in the day prior of spring and also take a minor look at everything that's going to happen moving forward. But until then, we're going to talk about game time. Folks, if you're geared up and ready to go to baseball games as soon as it rolls around the corner, download the GameTime app today and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off, because you shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. GameTime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, and comedy events near you. And with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. GameTime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute tickets. You can find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And with zone deals, you pick the section and GameTime picks the seats for big-time savings. And with the GameTime guarantee, it means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. So download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off, and download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And folks, a reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever 24/7 streaming channel for sports on Amazon Fire TV and YouTube. So check that out today with Locked On Sports today. And welcome to the third and final segment of today's episode of Locked On Pirates here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where we are debuting spring training news and notes on today's show. And I think it's going to be a fun little segment to have where we take a look at the day before, and we're going to also take a little bit of a look at the next day as well. And there was a good bit to talk about from the Pirates' first spring training victory of 2024 over the Atlanta Braves yesterday. And again, I think this is going to be a fun little segment to do. Pirates won 13-4 yesterday over the Atlanta Braves. Again, the wins and losses don't really matter all that much, but it was nice to see the Pirates offense kind of have an explosion yesterday. And when you're speaking about yesterday's game, you have to mention the grand slam from Bryan Hayes, which at the time tied things at 4-4 in the third inning. And although it was Hayes' only hit of the day, he finished 1 for 3 with 1 homer and 4 RBIs. The most impressive thing that I think came away from Bryan Hayes yesterday is the velocity off the bat from him. And he had 2 of the top 9 exit velocities in the game, including a 104.3 mile per hour clock in from the grand slam. His other was actually faster, but it was a ground ball. And overall, the Pirates did very well hitting the ball or getting the ball off the bat quick yesterday. They had 7 100-plus mile per hour exit velocities yesterday, with Bryan Reynolds having the hardest at 109 miles per hour, which also resulted in a home run off of Ben Bowden. So it was just an overall good day offensively for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And yesterday also saw the Pirates' spring debut of Marco Gonzalez, who was acquired from Atlanta for cash considerations this offseason. And it wasn't the greatest debut for him by any means. He allowed 3 home runs on 6 hits in just 1.2 innings of work in 41 pitches, with 31 of his 41 pitches being his fastball and his changeup. Now, the velocities on those pitches were just above his yearly averages. It was 0.5 for his fastball and 0.3 for his changeup. So no major dip in velocity, but the spin rate on his changeup was negative 28 than usual over his career. And it only elicited 2 whiffs on 7 swings. Not something you want to see for Marco Gonzalez. Now, albeit, again, this is his first outing. Give it time. And I'll also say that, yeah, a lot of people look at that box score for him and they'll say, oh, Marco Gonzalez didn't have a great outing. He really didn't. I'm not saying he had a good outing at all. He was a bit unlucky, though. He only gave up two exit velocities higher than 98 on the game. The rest of them were 87.1 miles per hour or lower. So, yeah, he got a little bit unlucky. There were some bloops in there. So we'll see what the rest of spring has to offer for the soft-throwing lefty. You also have to mention Luis Ortiz yesterday, who we've talked about on this show probably more times than I can count this offseason. And he had the 8 fastest pitches of the afternoon yesterday against Atlanta, all 8 of those pitches being 97 miles per hour or faster. And every fast pitch that Ortiz threw, that being his sinker and his fastball, was above 95 miles per hour, but he was regularly sitting 96, 97, and topped out at 98.8. Folks, if the velocity returns for Luis Ortiz, who also was a guy that you could say of the three, Quinn Priester, Rowanzi, and Ortiz, didn't really get affected as much by the velocity dip. He still had a decent season last year. Wasn't great by any means. He had his issues. But if the velocity returns for him, which it looked like it did yesterday, folks, Ortiz could be scary. He did give up a run, although it was unearned. He struck out 2, walked another in his 2 innings of work. But again, the velocity return was and will continue to be the biggest story surrounding Ortiz this season. It just has to be. And oh yeah, his spin rates look good too. Might as well throw those in there. We also got some good looks at Jose Hernandez, Hunter Stratton, and Kyle Nicholas. By good looks, I mean listening on the radio and looking at the box score and the advanced metrics. Those 3 combined to pitch 3 scoreless innings. And you're looking at Hernandez, Stratton, and Nicholas as guys who could make real impacts in that loaded bullpen group if needed moving forward. We also saw home runs from minor leaguers Abraham Gutierrez and Jackson Glenn, both high exit velocities on those as well. So an overall good day at the office in Bradenton for Pittsburgh. And tomorrow, we're going to talk about this in the third segment tomorrow. We get Paul Skeens versus Corbin Burns tomorrow when the Pirates play the Orioles. And I think that's fun. And MLB needs to find a way to get that broadcast somewhere. I don't know if it's going to be broadcast, but they need to find a way to get that broadcast. I mean, you're talking about a former Cy Young winner versus the number 1 overall pick in the draft last year, who many believe is the best pitching prospect we've seen since Steven Strasburg. Yeah, I need to see that. And we'll continue to cover spring training here on the Locked On Pirates podcast. And tomorrow wraps up the player preview series. We're going to talk about the farm system as a whole, what to watch for from the farm, guys that can make a real impact on the MLB roster this year, high flyers, high risers, all of that and more. And we'll also have a bonus episode of some sort tomorrow with a mailbag on Friday to end the week. So make sure you submit your questions. But until then, folks, thank you for tuning in to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. My name is Ethan Smith. You can follow me right there on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates. Again, for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. You can find this show on Spotify, Odyssey, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, see you tomorrow for that first and final 2024 Player Preview Series episode. We'll also have the other one coming out later in the afternoon. But until then, folks, I'll see you on the flip side.